In this video, I will share what I believe is the most important aspect of the sprint planning, arguably the only thing that matters, and why 99% of Scrum teams get this one thing wrong. But first, let's set the stage. As per the Scrum Guide 2020, sprint planning initiates the sprint by laying out the work to be performed for the sprint. The resulting plan is created by collaborative work of the entire Scrum team. The whole team then collaborates to define a sprint goal that communicates why the sprint is valuable to stakeholders. The sprint goal is the single objective of the sprint. As the developers work during the sprint, they keep the sprint goal in mind. If the work turns out to be different than they expected, they collaborate with the product owner to negotiate the scope of the sprint backlog within the sprint without affecting the sprint goal. In short, the sprint goal is the single objective of the sprint, the most important aspect of the sprint. But how do most Scrum teams define the sprint goal? Think about it. Honestly, how do you define your sprint goal? How does your Scrum team define their sprint goals? There's three typical scenarios here. First, they don't define any sprint goals. They just select an amount of work to do in the sprint, and they do the selected amount of work. There's no goals whatsoever. Second, they define a sprint goal, but a sprint goal is a combination of all the work to be done in the sprint. If there are 5 user stories to do in the next sprint, the combination of these 5 stories is the sprint goal. The sprint goal is basically completing these 5 stories. And the third option, they define a sprint goal, a valid sprint goal, but they ignore it during the sprint. All these 3 scenarios, these 3 ways of defining a sprint goal, wrong, incredibly wrong, simply because we are not focusing on the sprint goal during the sprint. Well, we're not defining it, or we are not focusing on the sprint goal. Remember, as per the Scrum Guide 2020, the sprint goal is the single objective of the sprint. Let's try to fix this issue together. You see, the sprint planning starts with product owners, and as product owners, we love the product backlog. That's the main thing that we do, product backlog management. We spend a lot of time writing the user stories, in refinement sessions with the team, refining these user stories, making the product backlog perfect, prioritizing it. And the goal here is to maximize the value, maximize the effort of the team to produce valuable products, features, services for our customers. And we do this by turning these product backlog items into valuable features. And because of this, we want to complete these priority items in the product backlog as soon as possible. And it's hard to resist during the sprint planning the temptation of just looking at the product backlog, prioritized product backlog, and tell the team, okay, that's a priority, start working on that. That's what most product owners do. They start with a product backlog. What can we do in this product backlog that will bring value for the customer in the next sprint? The developers will estimate the work based on the velocity of the team. They will pick a number of items that they believe they can complete. And when these items are selected and a sprint goal is crafted and they start the sprint. But during the sprint, what happens is the selected items, the sprint goal of the sprint, the selected items that we agreed to complete, that we believe we can complete in the sprint, that's the single objective of the sprint. And we're doing everything possible to complete these items. And it's a wrong approach. The correct approach would be the product owner starting with a vision, fair vision for the sprint. What do we want to accomplish in this sprint? What's the number one thing that we have to do in this sprint? The sprint goal. You start with that first, and then you start working backwards, starting with the end in mind and start working backwards with this goal in mind, the sprint goal in mind. What do we need to complete from the product backlog to reach the sprint goal? That's how you do it. 99% of Scrum teams don't do it. They start with a product backlog. They already tell the team, we need to do this. But no, don't do that. Start with a goal in mind, because there's a lot of roads that you can take to reach this goal. Let the team tell you what's the best approach. Decide that together. And at least when you start the sprint, you have a single objective, not completing all the sprint backlog items. No, the single objective of a sprint, what we need to complete in the sprint to bring value to the customer. And you have that when you start with an end in mind, meaning the sprint goal. In the previous life, I was a project manager and even a delivery manager. And for those fulfilling this role, you know that there's a lot of planning involved. You spend a lot of time planning for the good and sometimes planning for the worst. But no matter how much time you spend planning, how perfect you make that plan, you can't possibly cover all the scenarios. Because when this plan clashes with reality, everything changes. That's why the waterfall model doesn't work. We build a beautiful Gantt chart. Each team working on each item, dependencies, critical paths, good things that can happen, the worst things that can happen, and we build a plan around that, a plan for 1 year. We are dealing with humans here in a complex environment. Things change so often, every single day. That's why it's always better to plan for a week, 2 weeks, a sprint, and review that plan every single day in the daily scrum. We do that because we are in a complex environment. We have a hard time predicting the future. Again, the single objective of the sprint is the sprint goal, the only thing that matters. And one of the reasons, the only reason why we might cancel a sprint is that the sprint goal is no longer relevant. Yes, product backlog items are important, which are moved in the sprint backlog during the sprint. How to do it? We talk about that in the sprint planning. The developers need to tell the whole team how they plan on completing these sprint backlog items during the sprint. That's also important. But the sprint backlog items and how to do it can remain flexible. The sprint goal should be inflexible, can't change. And we are planning a sprint. We are making a prediction of what we believe we can complete in the sprint. In a complex environment, many things can happen. But as long as we have a sprint goal in mind, because we started with a sprint goal, we have a North Star that's always guiding us during the sprint. We can remove items from the sprint backlog, change items, delete items, add items, as long as they meet our North Star. They allow us to reach that goal, the sprint goal, the single objective of the sprint. All the decisions in the sprint, very easy to take because we just need to think of a North Star. Will this decision allow me to get closer to the sprint goal or not? If we don't have a sprint goal though, very hard to do because we don't even know what we are trying to complete in the sprint. At least the product backlog items, not a sprint goal, because the first day of the sprint, you'll realize that a lot of changes would happen in this backlog. The sprint backlog will change. Items will be removed, added, changed. What do? You update your sprint goal. You can't do that. Inflexible, remember. But if you have a sprint goal, a single objective of a sprint, you can do whatever you want with a sprint backlog as long as you're reaching that sprint goal. But most teams don't do that. Most teams, again, list of items, and that's the sprint goal. Others don't even define the sprint goal, but great Scrum teams start with an end in mind, defining the sprint goals, then what items will allow us to reach the sprint goal, and when we start working in the sprint every single day in the daily Scrum, they review their progress. How are we? What's the status of us progressing towards the sprint goal every single day? That's the main question that we need to answer in the daily Scrum. What will make us progress? What will make us get closer to achieving the sprint goal? Because it's the single objective of a sprint. Sadly enough, I see a lot of Scrum teams also working in silos. Seems like everyone in the team has a specific goal to accomplish in the sprint. Remember, it's a Scrum team with a single sprint goal, and we are working together, helping each other, supporting each other to reach the sprint goal. And the sprint goal brings focus, a single objective. We already know what we need to focus on. There's no questions about that in the sprint, and it builds teamwork. How can we help each other? Pair programming, guiding each other, helping each other complete our task to reach the sprint goal. If we complete early, we don't see any items in the sprint backlog to complete. But the sprint goal is not completed yet because another team member needs help. We don't take another item from the product backlog and add it to the sprint. No, obviously not. We already know the single objective of the sprint, achieving the sprint goal. So we do everything we can, helping each other, everything we can, resolving impediments to achieve the sprint goal together. That's what self-management is all about also. My team is self-organized. We know exactly what to do. We can decide who will do it, how they will do it, and by when they will do it. Self-organizing every single day. All the decisions are easy to take because they have their North Star, the sprint goal. And again, anything can happen during the sprint. You might believe that you'll build this feature in the sprint, but in the middle of the sprint, you realize that customers won't like that. They will prefer that. As long as that matches the sprint goal, you still have a valid sprint. But let's say your goal for the sprint was building this feature. accomplishing these product backlog items to build this feature. This feature is no longer relevant, so your sprint is no longer relevant. You didn't have a goal. The goal was linked to the customer. We want to bring a certain kind of value to the customer, not build this feature. No specifics in the goal. No, it's only a North Star, a single objective of a sprint. So next time you have your beautifully crafted product backlog, think about the vision. What's your vision for the sprint? What do we want to accomplish in the sprint? Resist the urge of only taking priority items and pushing it in the sprint backlog and telling the developers, okay, I believe that we can do that in the sprint. No, start with a sprint goal. Let the developers tell you what road to take to reach that sprint goal, because often they know better. They are doing the work. They will tell you what they need to accomplish from the product backlog to accomplish the sprint goal. It's a team effort. Everyone, we are making this decision together. And then you craft your sprint goal. You can watch this video for more details on how to do that. And once you do, what product backlogs items do we need to accomplish to get closer to the sprint goal, to accomplish the sprint goal? And you start taking these items and putting that in the sprint backlog, and you start your sprint. Remember, reviewing the progress every single day in the daily scrum and in the sprint review in front of the stakeholders. You start with, we had a vision in mind. That's our sprint goal that we wanted to accomplish. Did we achieve it? Did we not achieve it? You can even tell a story. We believed that to reach the sprint goal, starting the sprint, we needed to complete these items. But here's what happened. Here's why we are in a complex environment. Hundreds of changes later, what we believed we needed to do no longer is relevant, but the sprint goal still stands, and we accomplished it together. Which brings me to my next point. If you want more tips, insights on Agile, Scrum, personal growth, click on the video that stands out the most on the screen right now, and I'll see you in a few seconds.